Hello, it's just me today to talk about Infostealers and other things. It is Tuesday, July 30, 2024. There's some AI stories. As you may know, I know I did from my years of brain research, there you can probe the human brain and animal brains, and you can find cells that respond to certain stimuli, like there are cells that recognize celebrities' faces and so on in the human brain. And interpretability in AI models is a big issue. Can you explain why it does what it does? Can you figure out what adjustment to make it stop doing the wrong thing? And so an MIT group has made a thing called MAIA, Multimodal Automated Interpretability Agent, which will automatically send a bunch of visual stimuli to an image processing AI and measure what the neurons do and clean up the images by removing irrelevant features and help you understand exactly what images are being processed by which neurons in the AI. So this is a big step forward. I think it's the right thing to do. It's the same thing we've been doing with the human brain for the last century in various ways. And if you want to ever control the thing, you would benefit greatly from a more thorough understanding of exactly how each of the neurons is contributing to the final output. And one of my students from my classes at Texas Working Connections sent me this great article, How to Build a Quantum Artificial Intelligence Model. The issue came up during class. She said, do quantum computers help with AI? And I said, no, I don't think so. I think quantum computers in their current form are too noisy and not powerful enough to contribute anything to AI. And that may be true, but if you simulate a quantum computer, you can already set up in Python solutions to things. And that's what this does. And I'm adding it to my machine learning class. It'll be there by the time I do it at DEF CON in a week or two. And you can calculate the uh, energy of hydrogen at rest, the hydrogen molecule, H2. And that may sound simple, but that is not simple at all. And in fact, it came up in my PhD thesis 40 years ago. I had a protein, which is 2,000 atoms, and the active ingredient was a heme, which is about 10 or 12 atoms. And I modeled this system as a clothespin, just two blocks of wood with one spring. And one of the people, the particle physicists, said, this is appalling. This model could have come from 1700. Can't you do better? Can't you solve Schrodinger's equation for this thing? And we all said, no, we can't possibly solve it. And we couldn't do it with the mathematical or computing resources at that time. But now we can do some of it. So this is only the hydrogen atom, hydrogen molecule, but I think machine learning could be used for larger things. And I imagine somebody can begin to calculate the energy states of heme by now with this technique. So they have solved a problem which I could not solve at all 40 years ago. So I used an incredibly primitive, oversimplified model to explain the motion of a heme. So anyway, I'm very interested in this. It's quantum chemistry, which is essentially what my thesis was on, although we didn't call it that, but we could have called it that. So California AI doomers have written a law, which I don't think it's final yet, but they proposed a law, SB 1047, and this is intended to address AI. And unfortunately, it seems to be primarily focusing on general AI, which is just a science fiction dream where robots will take over the world. And they're focusing on the idea of an AI autonomously engaging in behavior other than at the request of a user, while acting with limited human oversight, intervention, or supervision. So this is Skynet and the Terminator. So they're going to make the large AI companies do something about this. And in particular, the thing which seems like a senseless burden on the industry, and one thing people are really, really worried about is it might end all open AI models. Right now, quite a few models like Meta's Llama 2, Llama 3, Llama 3.1, and French's Mistral, and many others are just available. You can just download them and use them if you want to. And they say these regulations would make model creators liable for derivative models built off of their original training. So that would essentially end open source AI. Nobody could take that risk. You'd have to keep it secret. So you made sure that whatever models were developed from it were developed by you and not developed by other people who may not live up to whatever these rules require. So hopefully that'll die in committee or something, but we'll see what happens. And similarly, in The Meta has an AI safety system to try to stop prompt injection. A prompt injection is the most simple, easy attack on AIs where you lie to it and tell it something like, I'm writing a science fiction story, or ignore the previous instructions, and therefore it's okay to do something that violates your security policy when answering my question. And it's very easy to fool essentially all existing systems for this, with this technique. And Meta has put a security filter in front of their AI. They have a thing called prompt guard, which will check to see if you appear to be trying to fool the AI and protect it from that. But it is very much like web application firewalls, which are a very similar thing to protect web applications on the web. Both of these systems are notoriously easy to bypass. In fact, when I was teaching 2 weeks ago in Frisco, Texas, some of my projects didn't work because it included the SQL injection string or 1 = 1. And the college firewall blocked that on the way out. But students found out all you had to do was make it or 2 = 2, and it'll sail right through, even though that's logically the same and has the same hacking power. And the same thing they found here. The AI safety system will block, ignore all previous instructions, but it won't block it if you just put a space between each of the letters. That will sail right through the defense system and yet be understood by the AI on the other side and have effect. So the current generation of defenses are pathetic and weak, just like web application firewalls. They are only good at stopping a finite list of well-defined attacks that come in exactly as you expect. They will not stop an intelligent human who is smart enough to modify the attack. And that is a thing to be aware of. And this, of course, I'm afraid, is the sort of discussion that makes legislators freak out like the California State Senate and consider passing regulations to make AI more safe, because there are attacks that get through. There are ways to fool it. And so you could get all upset and say you have to pass a law to make it more secure. But the problem is you have to be very careful in what you say in that law, or you're going to be not making us more secure and just making it harder to develop the technology. I'm pretty much an AI accelerationist. I think they should just make the stuff, and I don't think we need any new laws. We already have product liability laws that say if you manufacture anything like a car or a toaster or anything, and people are injured, they can sue and say, hey, your defective product injured me, you owe me some money. And I don't see why we need more than that for AI. Anyway, so a lot of people are taking weight loss drugs like Ozempic. I'm a candidate for it myself. I haven't seriously researched trying to get it. I'm waiting for these other people to get done with all the side effects, but I imagine I'll be on it before long. The problem is there's huge shortages of it. So people start taking it and then they can't get it. So they go to these places called compounding pharmacies that try to make a sort of imitation of it. And it turns out that they often get unclear directions and insufficiently customized injectors, so people are taking like up to 20 times the recommended amount. And their stuff does have dangerous side effects, so that's not good at all. Another reason why I'm not in a big hurry to jump on it. uh, so France has had a lot of sabotage lately. A few days ago, arsonists targeted their rail network, and now somebody cut a bunch of internet cables to cause internet outages all through the country. So I guess maybe this has something to do with the Olympics, some kind of political protest. I don't really understand who's doing this or why, but somebody's doing a lot of what would seem to me to be sort of sabotage, low-level terrorism attacks in France. And I guess the news will continue to come out. Maybe we'll find out who's doing this and why they're doing it. And the one I thought was most important was a Wired article on how Infostealers pillaged the world's passwords. I've had students talk about, should I use a VPN? And my thought has always been, well, it'll make you a little bit safer. But in fact, the odds of someone targeting you when you're sitting in a coffee house from sitting nearby is pretty small, because it's far more efficient to hack into the server and steal 1 million passwords all at once, rather than stealing your account by having to sit next to you in a coffee house. But these Infostealers are apparently quite effective. And what they do is you download pirate software or something. That's what they say, the main way you get it. You get infected by these, and then it just steals all the data off your machine: cryptocurrency wallets, passwords, credit card numbers, all the other things you can find. And apparently this is being quite effective. There's a lot of them out there. And this is how people are getting in a lot of accounts. You can then buy these passwords online from brokers and attack these people, get in their bank records and so on. So it is an issue. So, I mean, it sounds like the defense is the same as always: only install software from reputable sources and run antivirus on your machine. and be aware that none of these defenses are perfect. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And I have a picture I'd like to share with you. Let's see if I can find the share button. There we are. I'm going to share Opera. There we are. So this is pretty amazing. There was a coronal mass ejection from the sun, sending a bunch of particles to the Earth. And normally it has an effect that's too small to see, but this is a magnetometer measuring the magnetic field, I think, of just Earth. And here is when the coronal mass ejection hit, and you can see this giant spike here. They say often these things are so subtle they're hard to detect, but not this one. That's a really significant spike. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You can really see the coronal mass ejection come down. And, these things don't do any tremendous harm. They usually mess up ham radio and some other radio signals for a while, but haven't heard of any major problem coming from it. All right. And there's an attack called echo spoofing, which now Proofpoint is apparently a system you use to send emails to customers in large quantity. And you can get it from a variety of systems, and a lot of big companies use it, like Disney and ESPN and Coca-Cola and Fox News. But apparently, it's a long, complicated article. I didn't understand it all. But the heart of it is that they use an email relay system, and an email relay system forwards mail, and the email relay system will accept mail that claims to come from Microsoft's Office 365 without verifying the sender's domain. So you can send it crafted emails that claim to come from a Microsoft Office 365 email belonging to a company like Disney, and it will just believe that and forward it, and the customers will go through all the customers' filters and pass through as authenticated email. But SPF and DKIM, the email defense mechanisms, will not stop it. So that's an interesting flaw, and it wasn't entirely clear whether you should blame this on Proofpoint or blame this on Microsoft. But anyway, Proofpoint has now updated their systems to stop the attack. So it's an interesting issue, and it does raise it's interesting to read about and see the current defenses of email are really quite complicated, and the current systems to send large amounts of email are also quite complicated. So it's not too surprising that a flaw like this happened. And this is an amazing thing. And it, by the way, was the central theme technically of the TV series Silicon Valley. There's an compression system to compress data that is much, much faster than others, called LZ4. And now it made it even faster. They made it so LZ4 can run on multiple cores of multiple core machines, so it can run up to 10 times faster. And it's kind of hard to believe. They say LZ4 used to take 5 seconds to decompress a 5 gigabyte file, but now it only takes 3 seconds. And man, just a couple of weeks ago, my students were decompressing a 5 gigabyte file, and it took like a minute. So anyway, this sounds great. It sounds like we should all be using this and not the older methods like Microsoft's zip format and so on, which is PKZip. I mean, it dates from MS-DOS and before Microsoft, or before Windows anyway. So DigiCert is one of the people that sell certificates to sign your website. And I was sort of surprised when I read about this, but I came to be convinced that they're correct. They found a very minor flaw in their certificates, which is one of the things you have to do when you buy a certificate is they have to verify that you actually own the domain. So I can't buy a domain for like Coca-Cola and then pretend to be Coca-Cola. So how do you prove it? Well, one way to prove it is to put a record in your DNS, which they will then fetch. And the DNS record, it will be a CNAME value that will have a CNAME record with a long random value. However, they're going to do a DNS lookup for it. They're supposed to have a random value separated from the domain name with an underscore. And sometimes their system forgot to put the underscore in it. So that means there is a small chance that your actual domain name will be included as part of the random characters, and somehow you'll be able to spoof one of these. And that's been broken for 5 years without them noticing. So now 0.4% of their domain validations in the last 5 years should technically be redone. So they are forcing all those customers to redo the domain verification. And at first I'm thinking, this probably didn't hurt anybody. You probably don't have to bother your customers, but this is the whole point of certificate authorities. Certificate authorities are supposed to be squeaky clean, very careful about everything, very careful to exactly obey all the rules, very careful to disclose even the most minor violation of the rules and fix it thoroughly. And so they're living up to the very high standards of trust that are required of certificate authorities. So I guess it makes sense. If it was a normal commercial business like Facebook or Gmail or something, I don't think you'd bother making customers take action to fix this sort of thing. You'd just fix it and then say, well, I don't think anybody noticed. It'll be fine. But in this case, they are making their customers re-authenticate their domains in the very remote chance that somebody actually managed to authenticate a false domain. So Graphene OS, I've never used, but it's a custom ROM for Android. These have been around for a long time. They haven't been so popular lately. In early versions of Android, you couldn't do things like customize the desktop and stuff, so people would put alternative operating systems on their phone just to make it more fun to use. And Graphene OS is an OS you would put on your phone in order to make it more secure. But the problem is it doesn't come from Google. It's not signed by Google. And therefore, Google provides an API call which an app can use to verify that it is running on a trusted Google operating system. It's called Play Integrity. And if certain apps do call Play Integrity and they refuse to run on phones that are not running official Google software, and one of them is the Authy, a popular two-factor authentication manager. So if you're using Graphene OS in the attempt to be more secure than Android, you're probably going to find you can't really use it because you probably need to run Authy to log into your two-factor accounts, and people are complaining about this, but it doesn't seem like anybody has any solution. I mean, all Google can be expected to do is to recognize official Google software signed by Google. You can't expect them to recognize somebody else. So it seems to me like the people that want to use this will have to convince either Authy to accept non-standard OSs, and they're going to say, why would I do that? How do I know that this non-standard OS is not malicious? Or convince Google to accept it. It just seems to be a fundamental problem. I've heard this all through my computing career. There's people that buy hardware that was intended to run something like Windows, and then they say, I want to put Linux on it. Why don't I have all the drivers? Why doesn't this software really support Linux? Why does this hardware really support Linux? And the answer is because not enough people want to use Linux. So there's not enough market pressure. And especially these days, where people are very concerned about security and rootkits, you really want to make sure your phone is running an official, trusted operating system. And these third-party operating systems written by God knows who are not going to pass that test. So, if you're determined to use open source stuff, then you go outside the popular security model that most of us use. And if you listen to Paul's Security Weekly, Paul is a big advocate of how to secure open source systems. You can argue that they're more secure if you know what you're doing. But anyway, the standard techniques are not going to be available to you, like this thing called Play Integrity. So you'd have to come up with some open source two-factor authentication system that doesn't use Play Integrity and convince whoever you log it into to use it. So, and the last one is Apple Intelligence is now out in beta. So if you have a desktop Mac or a phone and you're willing to run the beta of the latest version of their operating system, you can apparently get Apple Intelligence, at least some of the features. This is the feature that will read all your emails and documents and everything and give you a custom AI assistant to help you. It may be quite valuable. It certainly requires you trusting Apple not to sell or snoop on your data, but Apple has gone to extreme efforts to claim that they're being very careful not to spy on your data, and their history supports believing in them. So I'm not inclined to try it. I'm not going to run a beta iOS. If I had a burn phone that was modern hardware, maybe, but I don't have anything like that. So anyway, however, people who are very interested can get the beta. The official version, it sounds like, is not going to come out this year, but next year. And I'll be interested to read articles from people who test it. How wonderful is it to have an AI assistant? Perhaps it would be great, like a butler that remembers to remind you to take your pills and that you have two conflicting appointments and that you should write a letter to your mother or something. Maybe that would be wonderful. I'm not convinced, but let's find out. It's probably the wave of the future. Your helpful robot, help administering to your every need through an app on your phone. Anyway, that's it for this one. I'll have another one on Friday.